if you take a Voodoo 3 clocked at 183 megahertz and a Matrox M3D overclocked to 80 megahertz and combine them onto the same PCB, you get this, the Lost Joker 2, a new invention from Anthony in Russia, who's placed both chips on the same board. And this black PCB makes it look even more amazing. So today we're going to put it in a computer, give it some benchmarks, and show you some games. I hope you enjoy. For this build, we're going to use a Pentium 3 at 1 GHz with 512 meg of RAM, an Intel i8-15 motherboard, and Windows 98. So, as this is a PCI video card, we will be installing it into the PCI slot. Now this card does need extra cooling, so I'll have a fan running and blowing on it as we do our benchmarks. I do actually want to get a proper PCI cooler bracket. There's some good options on the internet at the moment that you can convert an existing fan into one. So I will be doing that in future. But anyway, the card is installed and ready to go. So this is the current setup to keep it nice and cool, which actually is not even hot or even really warm to touch with this huge fan. So I will be having it running like this for all of the benchmarks. So let's first talk about the drivers. Because this card has a PCI to PCI bridge on board, it means that the computer simply sees it as two PCI devices. And this means that you can use unmodified drivers as normal. So for this video, I'm using the Voodoo 3 drivers from 3DFX. Now for the PCX2 chip, I'm using the Apocalypse 3DX drivers. This supposedly works best with MechWarrior 2. So I'm using this card out of the box. So that's running it at the 183 megahertz for the Voodoo 3. And the PCX2 chip is running at 80 megahertz. So as you can see here, the Voodoo 3 shows up as a normal GPU. Now for the PCX2, this actually functions very similar to, say, a Voodoo 2. It shows up in sound, video, and game controllers. And that's the video card there. Now with the PCX2 drivers, you can turn on and off this setting here, and this will enable or disable whether the card uses itself for direct 3D games. So with this turned on, it'll use this card for direct 3D games, and if you turn it off, it'll use the Voodoo card. So that makes it very easy to switch between the different cards for specific stuff. Obviously, if you use a Glide game, it's going to use the 3DFX card. And if you use a SGL game, then it's going to use the PCX2 chip. So it all works very nicely, and as you'd expect, really. So the drivers are very easy. I haven't tested other drivers yet. So far, it's been a really smooth sailing, very easy to use. So that's what we'll do for now. We'll start with that out of the box. And now let's have a look at some video games. So the first game I want to show you is MechWarrior 2. Now this game came out in a number of different versions that supported a wide range of video cards. Each version though you have to find and install. I'll link to a forum post on the Vogon's forum. It has some files that you can download to convert your version of MechWarrior 2 into the various different game options. There's also a really great video on YouTube that actually shows the difference between all the various supported video cards. So that, if you're more interested in getting into the details, that video is amazing, definitely worth watching. But for now, I just want to quickly show you the benefits you're going to get out of going from the standard version of MechWarrior 2 over to the PCX2 version. So we'll just fire up this. Now the conversion files only work on the Windows version, I believe. The intro of this game is great, so if you ever haven't played it before, definitely watch the intro. So we're just using the standard software. Let's actually have a look at the settings. Actually, I don't think there are any settings. It basically, oh, I think actually when you're in the game there is. So let's have a look.
Planet Colmar. Ambient temperature.
So everything's on high, and this is running in software mode basically.
45.60 degrees. Local time is 19:34:23 GST. All systems nominal.
So you can see here all the textures look pretty flat, but the frame rate's good. It should be, it's a Pentium 3. So let's take out this mech. Cool, so as you can see it runs quite nicely, but it is all in software mode. Okay, so let's quit that. And go into the PCX2 version. So let's fire up the modified MechWarrior 2 version. So I don't think any of the videos or anything are different in this part of the game, but as soon as we launch the game you'll see how much better this version is.
Planet Colmar. Ambient temperature 45.60.
So you can see we've got way more textures.
Local time is 19:34:23 GST. All systems nominal.
And the whole thing just looks significantly better. It almost feels like a different game. You've got the sky, you've got the box, you've got your little wireframe model. There's more polygons or something.
Enemy mech destroyed.
So yes, as you can see, it is a much prettier game running the PCX2 version. So I need to replay this game now that I've got this card, because that's definitely one of the main draws of having a PCX2 card. So let's go on to some other games. So the next game we're going to look at is Tomb Raider. Again, this game has a PowerVR version. It can run on the PCX1 and also the PCX2, which is very cool. So I'm just running the demo here. I haven't actually played this game before, which I know is probably sacrilege, but never actually played Tomb Raider back in the day. So we can push F3 to enable a frame counter, which is very cool. And then we can also increase and decrease the resolution on the fly, which is very clever. So let's just jump into a game at 640 by 480. Now you just have to remember that this side of the video board only has 4 megabytes of RAM because it's just the PCX2 side that's running this game. Now the interesting thing is that it actually uses the frame buffer of the primary video card to to render the output. So it's really 4 megabytes of texture memory. So that's actually kind of equivalent to a Voodoo 8 megabyte, which also has the same amount. So as you can see here, we're getting pretty much locked 30 at 640 by 480. And this game, I believe, has a 30 FPS cap. So then if I push F2, it will increase the resolution to 800 by 600. And you can see here it doesn't quite always keep the 30, but mostly. So it's pretty amazing, to be honest, a DOS game running at this kind of resolution in 3D, I think is pretty cool. And we can even go one resolution higher, all the way up to 1024. So yeah, this just blows my mind that a DOS game can do that. So yeah, this unfortunately is definitely a bit slow on this card. We're getting about the 20 frames a second here. But you can turn on single buffered mode, which I think is F8. And that'll drop us back to the 640 by 480. But then we can jump back up to 1024. And now we're getting almost 30 frames a second in 1024. And the game looks great. It looks really crisp. It's definitely really does showcase the power of this video card. So yeah, Tomb Raider is definitely high on the list to try out if you have a PCX2 card. So yeah, it actually looks like a pretty cool game, to be honest. I'm not sure why I never played it back in the day. I think I found the controls a bit hard, but it seems pretty good now. So I will probably have to grab myself a copy off GOG or something and play it. But anyway, as you can see, I think really I'd probably run this at 800 by 600. I think the 1024 is probably pushing it a little bit for this card, but still a very impressive considering the age of the chip and the performance and things like that. So yeah, Tomb Raider, cool game. So I wanted to show you guys Quake 2 running on the PCX2. So I'm running here the time demo at 640 by 480 in 32-bit color. And I think it looks really, really good. And I think quite playable at this resolution. It definitely looks a little different to the Voodoo 3. I think maybe there's some blockiness in some aspects, or the blood's a bit different, or there's something like that that's a little bit different. But I think it looks really cool and is, I think, quite playable. So obviously if you've got the Lost Joker 2, you'd be using the Voodoo 3 side, but it's pretty cool. Running the same test again now in 1024, again in 32-bit color. Now this is definitely way too slow to play, but it just looks really nice. It's just a really nice looking game. So yeah, it's really cool. Anyway, let's let this play out and then we'll look up some benchmarks.
So I wanted to do some benchmarks comparing the PCX2 at 66 MHz versus 80 MHz. I've had a couple of people ask me whether it's worth modding their existing PCX2 card to run at 80 MHz. Now, before we get started, this is just running at the standard 33 MHz PCI bus speed. So Anthony specifically told me that at the higher 80 MHz clock speed, it is bottlenecked by the PCI bus, and he recommends trying to overclock the PCI bus to 40 or even 44 MHz. So it is possible that my 80 MHz results here are a bit lower than what you'd expect with an overclocked PCI bus, but I've just taken the sort of simple out-of-the-box option to start with, just to get a sort of a quick overview of what is expected. So the first test here we've got is Quake 2. So you can see at the 640 by 480, you're getting a few frames a second extra at that 80 MHz. And to be honest, at this speed and this resolution, those extra couple of frames actually make a reasonable difference. I would probably be quite happy to play Quake 2 at 640 by 480 on this 80 MHz version. When you jump up to 1024, obviously it's quite a lot slower and really not playable. I just include the 1024 results here because it just blows my mind that a card with 4 meg of RAM can do 3D at that resolution. So yeah, probably worthwhile here on this test if you're running the 640 by 480. Now the other really cool thing with the PCX2 is it can run at 32-bit color, which again, you know, the more modern cards like the Voodoo 3 can't do that. So again, we're getting similar-ish results to the previous benchmarks in 16-bit color. The scores have got a bit closer. So again, yeah, not a significant difference here. I think at 80 megahertz, really, even at the 640 by 480, 32-bit color is a little bit too slow for my liking. The next slide here, I just wanted to show you what speed you'd get if you use the PCX2 in Quake 2 versus the Voodoo 3. Now you can see here that the Voodoo 3 is just infinitely faster, and you'd have no problems playing Quake 2 on the Voodoo 3 at 1024. You wouldn't normally run Quake 2 on the PCX2. The PCX2 is really better for your MechWarrior and Tomb Raider games a bit older. So it is interesting to compare because we can with this card, it's very easy. But yeah, for Quake 2, definitely going to recommend using the Voodoo 3 side of the board. Okay, so I'm going to show you one last PCX game. Now, this one's not officially supported, I don't believe, but there is a mini GL driver for Half-Life and a few other games. You can download it from Vogon's wiki. But all you do is download it, unzip it, and place the OpenGL 32DLL in your Half-Life folder. And I've just been having a quick play with it to make sure it would work for this video, and it works great. And it works with the latest 1.1.1 whatever version of Half-Life. So what I might do first is show you what it looks like in software rendering. So let's go 1024, that's pretty high for software, but we are on a Pentium 3. So, and for Half-Life, I always like to demo Crossfire, because that was a great multiplayer game map back in the day. So you can see here that, the frame rate's not great, and it's pretty blocky and pixelated. But it works pretty well, all things considered. So, yeah. So now I want to show you that on the PCX2. Now, remember, it only has 4 meg of RAM, so I think 1024 you would expect to be pushing it. But I tested it, and it works. And while not super quick, I was actually very surprised. So when you've got the PCX2 mini GL driver installed, just set it to default, and then let's go into multiplayer, and this is useful because it has the PowerVR logo, which makes it useful. So we're running in 1024. Now, yeah, the frame rate is not great. I would probably drop it a bit, but you can see it looks significantly better than software rendering. There is still some pixelation in some of the areas. I think maybe the PCX doesn't do all the standard filtering that some of the other cards can do. I'll show you it on the Voodoo side shortly, and it does look better. But to be honest, I wasn't even expecting it to load at 1024. This is a pretty intensive game for back in the day, and this is just a 4 meg card and not officially supported. So yeah, I actually think performance is pretty surprising. I think it works really well. So let's go and drop it back down to something like 640. Which is probably a more realistic resolution. And I just love how it has the PowerVR logo. And as you can see here, now we're running really very nice and smooth. So you could definitely get some deathmatch going in this with this video card. Now, obviously, if you've got the Lost Joker 2, you're going to be playing it with the 3DFX card, because it is obviously significantly better, but I just am very impressed, and I want to show off how well the PCX2 can run this. So let me quickly just show it to you in 3DFX mode, just to show you what you're missing out on. And the great thing is I can switch between all 3 modes without doing anything else. I can just change it now to the 3DFX mini driver. Now you don't see the the PowerVR logo, and here we go. So yeah, as you can see here, this is the sort of rendering perfectly, basically, and it is, yeah, it's really nice and crisp. All the textures look good. Frame rate's nice and high. So yeah, obviously the Voodoo side of this board is perfect for this game, and you could probably even run it at a higher resolution if you wanted, but yeah, it's pretty cool to have those options. So yeah, I just wanted to show you some heavier games that you wouldn't necessarily expect to work fantastic on the PCX2, and it does work really well. So the next benchmark is Half-Life 1, and to be honest, I'm quite impressed by the PCX2's speed at 640 by 480. I would have definitely played this when I was younger at 30 frames a second. Again, we're only seeing a couple of frames a second improvement with the 80 megahertz versus the 66 megahertz. Now, at 640 by 480, the Voodoo 3 is either bottlenecked by the CPU or by the bus, because as you can see, when we jump up to 1024, the frame rate barely drops. So I would definitely say that it's either PCI bottleneck or the CPU is bottlenecking it at the 640 by 480. Now again, if we look at 1024, really too slow to play Half-Life on the PCX2, totally fair enough. But the Voodoo 3, very playable, and I would play it at 1024. So again, just a cool little look at these 2 cards. So now on to some Glide games, and I was trying to find a game that I haven't shown before, because there's the standard Glide games that everyone shows. Anyway, it's sitting right in front of me, Tribes. And it has the fantastic 3DFX logo on startup. So we'll just do a quick game. Don't know why it's doing that weird graphical thing on load, but in the actual game it's fine. Not sure what version this is, but it's super smooth. You can see I haven't played it for a while. But yeah, this is a really fun multiplayer game, this one. So you can build ships to change your armor. You basically have to defend your base. And some of the maps are pretty cool too. And it's quite it's a big playing field. And yeah, this game runs just great on the 3D effects side. You can go in and destroy the base. Anyway, yeah, this is a really fun game. And Tribes 2 is pretty good as well. Not sure if it's still played much these days, but if you get a chance, definitely recommend playing Tribes. So now let's look at a more modern title, Quake 3. This one is OpenGL. So you can see we've got it at 1024, max everything. And this card runs really quite well. So yeah, it just about cracks 50 frames a second at 1024, so it's definitely very playable. Now you may want it slightly faster, having like a GeForce 2 would be probably preferable for this game, but you can see it looks great. And plays very nicely. But yeah, 32-bit color is preferable for Quake 3, so you won't get that on the Voodoo 3. But other than that, it looks really nice. But I can't play. So, another game that plays really very well on this card. So, as you can see, the Lost Joker 2 can pretty much play a huge range of games from, 96 early era 3D games all the way up to, probably 2000 year games. So, it's just such a flexible card with the various graphical API options. It works great, and I really haven't had any problems whatsoever with it. So I want to do some more benchmarks with it later, maybe looking at overclocking a bit further. But for now, I think that's what we'll stick with for this first review. Anyway, highly recommend it. If you talk to Anthony on Facebook, he can give you all the pricing, and also he's got a huge range of options. So he's got single SLI boards for Voodoo 1s. He's got the Mini-Me for a small form factor Voodoo 2s. A whole range of boards. So if you're interested in this kind of stuff, definitely worth having a chat to him.